New computer yet? Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay, then. Don't say that. Don't say that. My name. Hello, everyone. We're just chuckling. Ajahn Chah's line was my name. It's uncertain. Yeah, he just didn't give you any space. My name. So this meditation on the body, again, this idea that things are in awareness, I find that really, really helpful. And that relates to me to the Buddhist ideas of the world, that the world in one way is our conventional world. I'm on the 3rd floor and I'm enjoying the steps. And I think the monastery should build more high buildings so I can get exercise or something like that. No. So I live there, you live in your room and so on. That's true. That's a conventional world. But then also this capacity to see the world as stream of consciousness changing, perceptions arising and ceasing, concepts arising and ceasing, feelings, memories arising and ceasing. And that's where the perhaps Luang Por Chah's teaching on uncertainty, that's the kind of perspective which is very true, that it is very uncertain, but it's also, it's not just about an uncertain world, because if that was the only thing, you'd be terrified. You'd be absolutely terrified. And that's when you live in a war zone, maybe that kind of, but this is more pointing to the non-grasping of the khandhas or the mind-body experience through this kind of language. It's uncertain. And then if you're diligent with it, you sense, I would say, the silence of the background. And you get an intuition of what we mean by refuge in Buddha, Buddha knowing Dharma. Those kinds of ideas become more not just cultural, but actually real practical ideas. So when we take refuge in Buddha, we don't know if even this person lived. So that as a historical thing is an act of belief. But this is not, like when you take refuge in knowing Dharma, the way things are, then that's not cultural. It's not Buddhist per se, because Buddha simply means awake and aware of the way things are. So that's this body meditation for me is a way of approaching that that way of looking at the world, or that way of looking at things. So and also these kinds of perspectives do take time. They're not like really obvious. Like if you step on a rock on the Ottawa River and you crack your ankle, that's really obvious. That's really, really obvious. It's a very quick thing. This isn't like that. It's a kind of intuitive thing. You get a sense for it. And so if you allow these ideas just to kind of percolate in you, then I think that idea of the background becomes more trusted, I suppose, or more obvious. Yeah, I guess it would be more obvious. Anyway, so my first teacher of awareness was Krishnamurti, and that goes back to 1971 in India. So this is his take on that. One of his takes on that, the ideas around the world as being in awareness. I think, at least that's how I see this. The Pacific does not seem to have great tides, at least not on this side of the Pacific along the coast of California. It is a very small tide. It goes in and goes out Unlike those vast tides that go out several hundred yards and come rushing in, there is quite a different sound when the tide is going out, when the flow of water is withdrawing, from when it is coming in, with a certain sense of fury, a quality of sound totally different from the sound of the wind among the leaves. Everything seems to have a sound. That tree in the field in its solitude has that particular sound, being separate from all other trees. The great sequoias have their own deep, lasting, ancient sound. Silence has its own peculiar sound. And of course, the endless chatter of human beings about their business, their politics, and their technological advancements, and so on, has its own sound. The vast emptiness also has its throbbing sound. The ebb and flow of the tide is like human action and reaction. Our actions and reactions are so quick. There isn't pause before the reaction takes place. A question is put, and immediately, instantly, one tries to seek an answer, a solution to a problem. There is not a pause between the question and the answer. After all, we are the ebb and flow of life, the outward and the inward. We try to establish a relationship with the outward, thinking that the inward is something separate, something that is unconnected with the outer. But surely the movement of the outer is the flow of the inward. They are both the same, like the waters of the sea, this constant restless movement of the outer and the inner, the response to the challenge. This is our life. When we first put together from the inward, then the inner becomes the slave of the outer. The society we have created is the outer. Then to that society, the inner becomes the slave. And the revolt against the outer is the same as the revolt of the inner. This constant ebb and flow, restless, anxious, fearful. Can this movement ever stop? Of course, the ebb and flow of the waters of the sea are entirely free from this ebb and flow of the outer and the inner. The inner becoming outer, then the outer trying to control the inner, because the external has become all important. Then the reaction of that importance from the inner. This has been the way of life, a life of constant pain and pleasure. We never seem to learn about this movement, that it is one movement. The outer and the inner are not two separate movements. The waters of the sea withdraw from the shore, then the same water comes in, lashing the shores, the cliffs. Because we have separated the external and the inner, contradiction begins, the contradiction that breeds conflict and pain. This division between the outer and the inner is so unreal, so illusory, but we keep the external totally separate from the inner. Perhaps this may be one of the major causes of conflict, yet we never seem to learn, not memorize, learn, which is a form of movement all the time. Learn to live without this contradiction. The outer and the inner are one, a unitary movement, not separate, but whole. One may perhaps intellectually comprehend it, accept it as a theoretical statement or intellectual concept, but when one lives with concepts, one never learns. The concepts become static. You may change them, but the very transformation of one concept to another is static, is still fixed. But to feel, to have the sensitivity of seeing that life is not a movement of two separate activities, the external and the inward, to see that it is one, to realize that the interrelationship is this movement, is this ebb and flow of sorrow and pleasure, joy and depression, loneliness and the escape, to perceive non-verbally this life as a whole, not fragmented, not broken up, is to learn. Learning about it is not a matter of time, though, not a gradual process, for then time again becomes divisive. Time acts in the fragmentation of the whole, but to see the truth of it in an instant, then it is there, this action and reaction endlessly, this light and dark, the beauty and the ugliness. That which is whole is free from the ebb and flow of life. of action and reaction. Beauty has no opposite. Hate is not the opposite of love. Can work on that for a lifetime. Comment, because then I'll ruin it. And I enjoy that kind of reading, obviously, because look, I probably wrote that out so many years ago to get, other intuitions and other perspectives just into my consciousness. I think we all do that. You do it with poetry, you do it with art, whatever way you do it, and to let ideas or perspectives just come into your mind. You're not trying to figure them out, just to let them influence you. And I think that's the way of intuition. There's something about that writing, the ebb and the flow, that once it enters your consciousness, you begin to look at life in these different ways. And that's, I think, the life of the dynamism of our practice. Because our practice isn't about concepts. And I think that thing that when we go from one concept to another, it is dead. And you see the people who believe in Buddhism usually don't really get it at all, because usually they don't know how to reflect. They have really maybe neat beliefs and be clever, but when you try to get them to reflect, it's kind of like these kind of conspiracy theories. There's no reflection there. There's just a kind of position. So Buddhism is a conspiracy theory. That's not a good idea. That's not what it's about. But you see what I mean? But a concept can be brilliant, or a reading or ideas can be brilliant for considering perspectives. Yeah. So it's not saying it's right or wrong. It's not that. And in the whole basket of concepts that the Buddha offers in his teaching, you don't really need that much. It's not like more knowledge is better. That's encyclopedic. I used to think that. I think, if I get more knowledge, it would be better, but just got constipated with ideas, right? And so it's not like taking more and more knowledge, because knowledge is in itself just concepts, but it's having the skill to take something like Ajahn Chah's, it's uncertain, anicca dukkha anatta, say, and really, really like keep bringing that up as a possible way of looking at life, and then seeing how that affects you. How does that actually affect you? And you'll see it has a profound effect, because it changes the perception that I am the owner of all this ebb and flow, to this ebb and flow being just one continuous sense experience and stream of consciousness. But then the final paragraph is to me obviously very important. So I don't misquote it. That which is whole is free from the ebb and flow of life. Beauty has no opposite. Hate is not the opposite of love. And I think that's when I'm talking about the background, this is what I'm hopefully kind of intuiting, is that we have to work in the conventional world. We have to work in the ebb and flow of life. That's just the way life is. But that's not our refuge. Can't be. That's our duty. That's where we practice bodhisattva, or generosity, or morality. That's our, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he says that compassion is the method. I like that. I really like that. That's the method. That's how we kind of live our lives in the conventional realm. That story I like to tell of His Holiness when he was being interviewed in New Zealand by you've heard me tell the story, but a very abrasive, one of those abrasive interviewers on a show in New Zealand. That's one of the horrible interviewers that always has to be challenging and rude. I don't know how they put His Holiness on there, but so he asked His Holiness, so are you angry at the Chinese? His Holiness says, no. Do you hate the Chinese? No. So I don't believe you. Like, and His Holiness just chuckled. He just chuckled. No, I mean, I know what they've done. I know what they've done to my people, but I don't harbor hate. What's the point of that? Well, he said it more elegantly. So you can see he lives in a world of deep troubles that his people have experienced, and he is so happy. It's just astounding how beautiful it is to be with him. So what's that about? It's still being in the world of the ebb and flow, but not being just a victim to the ebb and flow, or to the being a leaf in the wind in that way. So hence these kind of perspectives of noticing perceptions arise and cease, noticing bodily feelings arise and cease. I think if you keep intuiting that, that becomes more and more a sense of relaxing into the silence of the mind. It is a relaxing. It's not a holding. It's not that. It has a kind of deep sense of, oh yeah, it's home again. So if you would, whenever, again, I said this earlier in the beginning of the retreat, but this is still the beginning of the retreat. I suggested that when you awaken to the fact that maybe thought has been proliferating or whatever, had a good moment rather than a regretful moment, rather than say, oh God, I'm thinking again, and say, oh great, home again. And that's so helpful. That's so very, very helpful. In that same vein, this is presence ever absent into the language of your contemplations as you meditate, because there is an insight there where you have the habit of getting caught by thinking, perceiving that you are the thinker, then judging those thoughts that I have to stop thinking, and then trying to meditate so that you stop thinking. That's all self-view. And does it work? I don't think it works. Whereas if you can, and so I guess the question is, how do you get the insight to know that actually you're not the thinker? That thoughts are triggered by memories and habits. So the way you can do that is to try to have enough awareness when there's that sense of knowing what's going on, to ask yourself, yeah, but was presence ever absent? Was I ever not here? And that's a very, very, I say, a very fruitful investigation for me, at least. Because that whole idea that I'm the thinker and I have to stop thinking seems like it's true. Well, who else is thinking? You're not thinking. But is it true? And you're kind of inquiring into that, not believing that you're not the thinker. That won't help either. And that question puts you right there, puts you right in that moment when there's this sense of awakened consciousness. And you have to sort of, I guess you have to program the mind to make that suggestion. This is quite often what you need to do with the strong habits of mind that we all have, the strong habits of whatever it might be. You need to put in a kind of a suggestion. This is in cetana, or intention. You put in a suggestion around those areas of delusion, say. Okay, let's say take an example more obvious. Let's say I'm a very judgmental person, and my speech just comes out always critical and judgmental in family life, and there it goes again. And I know it doesn't come from mindfulness. It comes from a place which is habitual and creates suffering in myself and others. And even though I vaguely think I'd like to get beyond that, it's so strong as a deluded as a reaction, like he's saying in that reading, that I'm not, there isn't enough mindfulness or care to actually notice that. So then you need to put a suggestion into the mind. Okay, judgment. I'm going to try to notice the arising of judgment. That's different than saying I'm never going to judge again, which doesn't work that way. The mind doesn't work that way. So you start to make that your practice, that this very naughty little problem that you have in both in your own mind and relationships, you say, okay, that is my practice. To try to see the arising of judgment and then the result from having got caught by that. And you just keep making that suggestion, and that will create more mindfulness around that. That's what intention is. As opposed to the intention, which is ego-based, of I'm a terrible person, I'll never do that again. That doesn't work. That the mind doesn't work that way. The mind is a causally related stream of consciousness within which things get triggered and things take place, ebb and flow. So, okay, I want to work there. Okay, I'll say, okay, when that arises, say, I'll try to see it's arising, and then you get good at it, and then you don't speak through it. It takes a while. And as you don't speak through it, you say, oh, yeah, you see it as an object, you don't become the subject. So but more profoundly than that, and that's a sort of, well, we all have those kinds of things. This one is presence ever absent. That's a very, very, for me, I don't know about you, but for me, that's a really, it's a real background kind of question, presence ever absent. And if you hold that in a dynamic way, you hold that, and you can't really, if you answer it, no, yes, it is, or no, that's not it. It's this life that Krishnamurti talks about. You hold that, then you'll see that actually, even though thoughts came and went, presence was never absent. And that's very, very helpful, I would say, in that whole struggle we have with thinking and trying to get rid of thought. So the reaction can take place, but then that becomes less and less important as we understand that the background or presence, we begin to identify that as our real home. Yeah. Shall we meditate? If you want to meditate, meditate. If you don't want to meditate, meditate. I won't give instruction, but if you want to use that body thing, you can. And also maybe like in the day before, I said, notice the silence, and then in the out breath, take that sense of I as the knowing, and let it be deeply relaxed on the out breath. That's very helpful. Deeply relaxed, I, because it's not about becoming, it's about knowing. Okay, let's do the sitting then.